Okay, hello, SC202 students. I believe this is week 7. This will be the last regular lecture as far as the textbook content goes. I might make another one on to help you with Moodle, but this will be the last. This will be the last classroom lecture. This is on ecology. And this is the last unit that we will be covering. And I'm calling it Ecology 2, and which is just the last half of the chapter that we was doing last week. Okay, in week 6. Okay, the main concepts in this, and if you look at the PowerPoint, are populations and population dynamics, the human population, and just a little bit about human demographics, which can be an interesting area of study. And a good place to do those studies is in a cemetery, actually, where you see birth dates and death dates. I used to have, where I taught high school, had cemetery down the road. I'd take the biology students down there to do a demographic study. Okay, we'll talk just a little bit about biodiversity and the importance of biodiversity. And then in the discussion, the lecture with human impact on the human biosphere, actually overall, and what some call the 6th mass extinction that is actually taking place currently in the world. Okay, or as some are suspect of. Okay, so let's move on through this. Okay, populations. A population is a group of the same species that live in the same area. Okay, and we can have all kinds of populations. We're talking about deer, white-tailed deer, or rabbits, or squirrels, which you could have fox squirrels, or you could have gray squirrels. You could talk woodpeckers. You could talk wrens. You could talk eagles, and how eagles have made a comeback in Indiana over the last couple of decades. But those are populations and examples of populations. Communities are where you have the interacting populations in a given area, which can include plants and animals. We have some diverse communities in Indiana, ranging from wetland-like communities to forest lands to pastures. Okay, and ponds and lakes and so forth. Okay, each can have their own unique communities and have their own unique populations in them based on the communities. Okay, so now then, some key terms. Population size is simply the number of individuals in a population. Okay, and our Department of Natural Resources in Indiana do studies all the time on particularly species that are particular interests, like white-tailed deer, and even things like pheasants and quail and turkeys. And I'm talking types of animals that are hunted. Okay, and in order to determine the seasons, how many weeks a year they have open for seasons, and particularly on deer, how many days they're going to give a year for hunting with guns and so forth. They set by keeping a track of and paying attention to the population size. So they keep the populations as healthy as they can, and that we're not over hunting. But they also, with the population size, I think somewhat get information from how many deer are hit by cars. Okay, the insurance companies kind of give them that information. Okay, population density. Population density is a big factor when you're studying populations of animals in an area. If you get too heavy of a population density, they can somewhat decimate an area. Like if you have way too many deer in an area, which we've had down in Brown County, Indiana before, then they overgraze, and then you end up getting disease and things occurring within the populations that all of a sudden you can have just a sudden die off of a bunch of them because they got too dense. Okay, and that's where there's been some reintroduction of some predators in areas in order to control certain species like elk out west and the wolves. Okay, but population density is the average number of individuals in a population that live in a given area. And you'll either talk in terms of square miles or square meters. Okay, now then, and the more that you get per square mile, the heavier the density is, and the more problems that you can get, the heavier the density is. Now then, besides the density, you can talk the population distribution, and this is you can have it uniform or you have them equally spaced. Okay, like if you look at people in a city like Terre Haute or Indianapolis, somewhat you got uniform spacing of the homes and so forth. So you get out more rural areas, then it's more random. Okay, the same goes with animals in the environment. Is you'll see certain types of animals that will have their populations in a woodlands or a pasture where they're kind of clumped. They're over here, like quail could be clumped up where they're in the brush piles here, or they're over here, or they're over here. That's kind of clumped. They're not spread throughout it, but they're going to be in those little habitats that they like to be in. Okay, you can see this somewhat with deer, and like elk, you'll see them change in the like in the summertime. Elk out west are really random. Okay, they're all over the place because there's all kinds of grays. But in the wintertime, when there's a lot of snow on the mountains and there's less grays, and they all come down to lower ground, and you see them either clumped up, and in areas you see them uniform distribution because they're all in the fields where there's still gray. So you can see some populations where their distribution changes through time. And you see that even like with geese when they migrate. Okay, you can have pretty uniform distribution of geese on a lake at certain times of year. Okay, and particularly around here in the spring, it seems. Okay, but distribution just refers to how the animals, plants or animals are distributed in an area. The same thing goes with trees. Like typically you don't see in one area in a mature woodlands a whole bunch of oak trees, like red oak trees, right in one place, rather they are distributed throughout the woodlands. Okay, and most of them probably more random than anything with most of our trees. But you take grass on the other hand is more evenly distributed across your yard. Okay, so you talk population distributions, both plants and animals. Okay. Population growth and structure. Okay, population growth is change in size of population over time with the number of individuals in the population increasing through time. Okay, and there's a few ways that you can look at population growth. And one of the key ones that we do, and this is where you get into what you call human demography studies. Okay, particularly if you look at humans, but you can also look at all animals. Okay, and actually all plants. Okay, and look at what's called a population pyramid, where you look at both the sexes, male, female, and then the age classes. Okay, now then naturally you'll have the highest numbers, it seems, in particular with humans, okay, of younger individuals. Okay, and as you get older, you have less individuals. Okay, so you get up here towards 80, 90 years old. Okay, now you see women tend to, this is for humans here, women outlive men. You see over here on the population pyramid, some numbers. So this is well into the 90s to 100 years old better. Okay, whereas here the men fall out about right here. Okay, now then, does remove individuals from the population. So that's why you see this go. And now this seems to be a natural way of things, but this is not the way all populations are. Okay, because of us and because of the impact of man. Now, humans, because of our better living conditions today and so forth, we've made this structure the way it is where we can live longer. And these are actually getting broader up here in the older age classes. Whereas if you looked at this back in the 1800s, there'd be very, very few that would live to be very, very old. Okay, the way we see it today, we've got a whole lot of people that live into their 80s and 90s and beyond. Okay. But whenever you're looking at these, you call this a population pyramid, and you can call it an age sex structure of the population. That's where you're looking at the age classes, and you're looking at the different sexes, male and female. Okay. And as the bars get narrower, then that's less individuals at those age groups. Down here, broad, you got big, high numbers of them. Okay, and we look at this more in another way, different type of graph. We look at what we call survivorship curves. Okay, it is graphical data that shows the relative number of individuals still alive at given ages. So you see the age down here. So you're going from birth to like 100 years old or whatever. Okay, but this could be different for different animals, because a lot of animals, if they live to be 10 years old, that's a home. Okay, so this scale could be different for different populations. But there's three basic survivorship curves that we see with all populations. You have a type 1, a type 2, and a type 3. Type 1 is where parents produce relatively few offspring and provide a lot of care for a period of time to their young. Okay, so that's most large animals. Okay, have very few young. Okay, like deer. Okay, like elk. Okay, and bear. They have very few young. They care for the young. Their young stay with them for a period of time. Okay, and before the young are off on their own, so they're getting care. So that's where you get a greater survivorship curve, and more of those young live to be older ages before they die off. Okay, but then you have type 2, this one, where the parents produce a moderate number of offspring, okay, and provide some parental care, but then they push them out of the nest pretty quick. And that's a lot of your birds. Okay, within weeks, their young are gone. Okay, and deaths of them occur more uniformly through time. Okay, they have the most consistent curve, if you want to say, of either one of the types. But then type 3 are a lot of our fish, a lot of our insects, thank God, where they have huge number of young. Like fish can have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of young, like a bass, but very few of them make it to adulthood, okay, to reproducing individuals. So that's where you see this curve here, that you have a huge number of them born, but then they die off very, very rapidly, and very, very few will make it. Okay, so out of 1,000 eggs laid by this type of fish, only a couple of them is going to make it to be breeding adults. Okay, so those are your three types of survivorship curves, okay, that you see in populations, and that's what you can work with kids and see and get them to understand. Like they can, they'll have guppies and so forth in their aquariums at home, but then they can see and realize, and if you keep an aquarium at school, they can start seeing and realizing how those populations do. Okay, and that's the way it has to be, because on type 3, every one of them would be overpopulated with all kinds of animals. Okay, it just can't be that way. Okay, so that's survivorship curves. Okay, population growth rates. Population growth rates, how fast the population changes over time. A positive growth rate means population numbers are increasing, and negative growth rate means populations are decreasing. Okay, and that's where we keep a check on a lot of the animals and plants in the environment, because there are some that when we look at them become an endangered species, then that's what we're looking. We're seeing the negative growth rates falling down really bad. Okay, and we see that with fish, we see it with types of animals, see it with birds, in areas as we have done away with a lot of their habitat. Okay, and also invasive species have affected that too. Okay, but the main things that affect population growth rates directly are immigration. Okay, that's new individuals coming into the population. Okay, you can somewhat talk that like immigration into a country and getting a number of people that live in the United States of America. Okay, that's humans. But you can also have that with populations of animals as they move from one area to another, particularly if there's been habitat destruction in areas. Then they got to move from that area to other areas. So they actually kind of immigrate from one point to another. Then you have immigration, which is where the animals leave. So like you have some types of animals where they have to leave. It's like some wolves. If you get a pack of wolves that kind of divide up, okay, then you'd say the ones that left immigrated and they're going to be part of another population. Okay, but you could have this, I suppose, with deer as well. And this is particularly if they start getting overpopulated in areas, then they can move and they become a part of a neighboring population. Okay, and it also, of course, happens with people. Okay, migration is a seasonal movement. Okay, and this is like our ducks and our geese that you see them migrate. Swans do it. And we see it with the birds more than anything else. Okay, hummingbirds. Okay, there are annual migrations, and they pretty much make the same migrations each year relative to the seasons. Typically, in the wintertime, they're headed south in the northern hemisphere. In the springtime, they're headed back north. Okay, to their feeding grounds and breeding grounds and so forth. Okay, so migration is an important aspect of population dynamics. Okay, this graph over here kind of shows deer population trends in the United States from 2000 through 2010. Okay, actually, I think it's not the United States; it's in Indiana. Okay, and this is type of study that the Department of Natural Resources does, whereas you see the population growth rate here was increasing, but now here it's leveled off and fallen just a little bit as you approach 2010. Okay, so that's where you can see, you can talk to students when you look at a graph. This is a positive growth rate. Here's where the growth rate leveled off, and then this is a negative growth rate here. Okay. Okay, human population, this is just human population. The human population has become 8 times as large as it was in the 1800s. Okay, that's the human population in the entire world. Okay, in the early 1800s, there's about 1 billion people on the earth, is estimated, the estimate. We are right near 8 billion people in the world. It's 7.9 or whatever billion people in the world right now. Okay, on which we are impacting this world tremendously because of that. We don't see it as much in Indiana, but you go to some countries like India and China and even like New York City and so forth, where you got your very big cities and San Francisco and Phoenix and Miami, you really see impacts. Okay, but humans are defying the natural processes, and we are getting our population profile somewhat out of whack. Okay, and if you look at the age structure, the human population, that's what you call human demography studies. Like you see, United States is right here. Okay, as compared to one that you've seen on the other slide, this stays broader at higher age classes. So you see, when you're up here at the top, you're in the 80s, 80 years old range. These become broader as we come up here. If you look over here to Germany, Bulgaria, and Sweden, look how wide theirs are here, particularly the women over here. Okay, the females. Okay, but look at the bottom. This is back asswards. Okay, you have less individuals down here being born than are what are up in here that are in the middle ages and approaching older ages. Okay, so that's where your population somewhat turned upside down. Okay, United States, we're slower growth, and economics has kind of driven that, I think, because we tend to have less young than what our families had, say, 100 years ago. It wasn't uncommon 100 years ago for a family to have 8 to 10 brothers and sisters in a family. Most families now in the United States only have one or two, maybe 3 children. Okay, and that's kind of helped form this. But now Guatemala, Nigeria, Saudi Arabia, this is more of a natural population age structure here, where you see it's really wide at the bottom and very few make it up here. Okay, and not saying that's what we should be, but and with our population age structure like this also impacts and affects everything from social security. I can't even talk social security in this country to insurance and insurance rates, because we've got more people living longer. But here, this demand in these countries for health care in the older ages has to be much more, particularly since it's you got as many up here as you do down here, and it's approaching more. Okay, so that's a population age structure, and then that's what I'd want you to be able to explain to students, tell them what it is. Where you see you got a lot of people living to older ages here. You got almost more older people here than you do younger. But down here, over on this one, you have more younger people than you have older people. Okay, on this graph, this is a world population growth rate. Okay, shown it, and it shows the exponential growth of people through time. Okay, so this is see here in the 1800s. This is 1800s right here, because it's going all the way back in time. This 1050 here, you get 1800s here. See, the human population pretty much stayed steady, but it's what the living conditions were. It's able to maintain. You got a little bit of growth up through the 16, 17, 1800s, and this is when it started populating the United States, of course. Okay, but then into the 1900s, better living conditions, healthcare development, industrialized nations, homes with controlled climates. Then you got this exponential growth rate here that has taken place during all of our lifetimes. Okay, so that's just to show them the exponential growth rate of the human population. Okay, moving on, biodiversity. Biodiversity is good. The more, and we seem to fight it all the time, from the way we like to maintain a yard to nice grass, all the blades of grass all exactly the same and nothing else in it. That's not biodiversity. Biodiversity is what you see in these images, where you see a bunch of different plants, a bunch of different organisms. Like this one, these could be in my backyard. Okay, if you could just find them all somewhere, from beetles to pinching bugs, and a lot of these are microbes. Okay, that you can find in aquatic environments. So there's an earthworm. Okay, to deer and fox and chipmunk there, an old possum right there. Okay, the more of these you have in your backyard and around, the more biodiverse it is, and it is healthier for the ecosystem. Okay, biodiversity includes all animals, all plants, algae, fungi, produce, and all kinds of microorganisms. Okay, and that's the thing to teach students: biodiversity. Okay, I've tried to increase biodiversity on my place. I don't say I'm on my grass. I'm pretty fanatic about mowing grass, but I've planted thousands of trees on my property, and I have all native trees planted on my property, a few acres of them. Okay, Okay, ecosystem services of biodiversity. Okay, and this is we're saying and this is where creating biodiversity in cities like you see in Chicago and other places where they have rooftops where they are now making them green and growing trees and grass and gardens and everything on the rooftops. This biodiversity provides natural services to the environment. Okay, it increases the productivity and the stability of everything natural. Okay, but the key things here are plants and algae maintain the atmosphere by putting O2 in the atmosphere and taking CO2 out. Taking CO2 out in the cities really helps. It kind of cleanses there. Okay, plants. Anytime you plant any type of plants around your home and on hillsides, particularly, they prevent soil erosion. Okay, and that's where all my trees help. Okay, microorganisms purify water in rivers and lakes. They also return nutrients to the soil. Okay, the big one is bacteria fix nitrogen. Okay, and that's where I talked in last week how lightning actually fixes nitrogen out of the air to the soil, but then the bacteria are also working the soil on ammonical waste from animals, urine, break it down and fix that nitrogen in a usable form that plants can use. That's what you call it, fixing it, where they make it into nitrates. Okay, and then other natural services or ecosystem services that are very beneficial are bees, and that's what a lot of your honeybee growers. I've kept honeybees pollinate. Okay, and they help out a lot of plants, and that's where if someone has an apple orchard, they love to have honeybees around, and they'll pay guys to bring their honeybees and set them up at their orchards. Okay, but they're good pollinators, and it's good to have bees around a home if you like to have flowers around the house. Okay, and then other natural predators that are really good around homes, and a lot of people are scared of them, are bats, but the swallows are too. Eat all kinds of mosquitoes. Okay, so those are examples of ecosystem services provided by having a lot of biodiversity around. Now, of course, there's things that we do which encroach on this, and that's like if they're coming around spraying mosquitoes, they're doing away with some biodiversity on you. Kill the mosquitoes, you're also hurting the populations that feed on the mosquitoes, like the swallows or the bats. Okay, so it's some things to think about and what you want to tolerate because it is times that the mosquitoes are so bad that we have to do things to control. Okay, and because back in time, of course, the mosquitoes carried things like malaria. Okay, so I believe this is the last slide here. This is on what's predicted to be the 6th mass extinction of animals on Earth. Okay, plants and animals. Mass extinctions have taken place through time. There were 5 known, well-documented mass extinctions through the dinosaur era and all the way up to the Cenozoic era that we're in now. Okay, many people believe this 6th mass extinction is taking place now. Okay, and go and give reasons for it here. Okay, the biggest and number one is habitat loss. We've cleared so much forest, we've cleared so much rainforest, we've cleared so much natural areas, even grasslands, that we've taken it out of its natural habitat, and that ends up naturally killing some animals and some plants, of course. Okay, so this is the single biggest factor. Okay, to build our cities, to build our subdivisions, to build our industrial sites, we're doing away with habitat, and then in that it does away with a lot of animals and plants. Okay, introduction of exotic species. The big one around here in Indiana is the honeysuckle in the woodlands. By it being in the woods and woodlands, it takes everything over, and then our native trees don't repopulate well, okay, because of the competition with it. If you take a look, there's nothing that grows underneath where you have a bunch of honeysuckle. Multiflora rose is another one. In the rivers, you're getting Asian carp, and they're out competing all the rest of the coast, gobble everything up. So it ends up killing off a lot of our own native species. Okay, the Illinois River just a few years ago had the highest population of Asian carp of anywhere in the world, and they came from Asia. Okay, so there's more Asian carp in the Illinois River than a river in China, which is wild. There's quite a few in the Wabash River. Okay, overharvesting of particularly plants and trees for wood has led to a lot of habitat loss. Okay, and loss of given types of species, or the very slow growth rate of them because of our overharvesting of them. Okay, and we have done it, and we've even done it with types of fish fishing out of the ocean. Some have predicted, like the tuna fish and halibut, and the ones that we really like, that we have been guilty of doing some overharvesting. Okay, global climate change is a factor. Okay, because of the general warming up of the Earth's atmosphere's changing climate, which then changes habitat, which then there's naturally going to be some species that die off. And that's, of course, what happened to the dinosaurs back in time. Climate change did it. Okay, pollution, all the different types of pollution that we're putting out there in the environment's having an impact. Okay, and then trying to get kids to realize this and know, and we need to clean up our act. And the EPA has done a decent job of that in the United States. Okay, and then simply human overpopulation. Okay, we're approaching 8 billion people now. Where's that going to stop? And it's like humans are the most important beings on the earth. Well, we also have a great environment out there and some really neat critters. We need to protect them to the best of our ability. Okay, so that wraps it up. That's it. That's this unit. That's the last of these lectures. Okay, so have a good week.